From Hong Kong, Chicago, and the city of Stoke-on-Trent, this is the Classic Lenses podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 84. My name is Simon Forster and I'm joined by Johnny Sisson and Perry G. Hello, Johnny.
Hey, I thought we were going to bullshit for a while still. We just started? Okay.
Yeah, we have. Hello, Johnny.
Well, you know what? I got to say, Simon, that was amazing timing because I was about to say it's really gray here this morning and it's going to be rainy. And literally the sun has just broken as your voice started. Like as you began speaking, the sun came out.
Wow. So we don't have to ask you about the weather this week. That's good. That's
no,
good.
The weather made itself apparent.
Excellent. And just to finish that sentence, and hello, Perry.
Hello. It is hot as balls in Hong Kong, and I just had dinner.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Those two things are not related.
Yeah. Well, seeing that this podcast has already gone wrong, let's try and bring it on track. And we missed at least one email the other week, and I think we should let's do emails right from the start, Johnny.
Hold on a second. I dropped something. I was bending down under my desk. No, I don't read any emails.
Okay. Well, if you're going to be like that, we're going to have to get Graham Jargo from the Sunday 16 podcast to read them. So go ahead, Graham.
Okay, we've got some great emails this week. This first one is from Ian Fleming, who writes in, Simon, Johnny and Perry, great episode and good discussion on 3D. I did research when moving to HD from SD TV for my job some years back. And yes, it's not all about just pixels and resolution. The human perception of scenes is greatly dependent on contrast and lighting. A lower resolution can look better given the right contrast and lighting to the human eye. Welcome to my Horizon User Club. Thanks for the humorous and informative podcast. Is that really you there, right about?
I know one thing, that you dropped out at quite a crucial moment there, and it sounded like Ian was talking about STDs.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's good, and well, that's more of a statement, really. So, but we have another email. That was the one that we didn't do the other week, but we've got an even fresher email from Ian. So, do you want to take that one away?
Sure. He writes in, I work as a train driver in a local botanical garden. There's actually a song about that. I think he goes,
wait, is that actually a job?
As a train driver in a local botanical garden when I met you. And today, while taking my tickets, a young couple came by. The man had an A7R11, which I think is a sort of robot, with a nice myoptics lens on the front. I rather took them by surprise by showing a bit of interest. They were Hungarian, and it turns out they listened too. I don't know their names as I was working and didn't want to seem too bonkers. Can we just clarify? He got to the point where he was discussing what podcast that they listened to, but not what their names were, and he didn't want to seem too bonkers. Good work, Ian.
As he's driving this train. Yeah.
He's driving. Anyway, it's great to meet fellow listeners. Regards from Ian.
Where do they have trains in botanical gardens? Is it like one of those miniature trains that everybody sits on the top of a little car that looks like it's a full-size car, but it's tiny?
I think it is. I think that's exactly what it is.
It's a bullet train. It's like a Japanese bullet train from begonias to petunias, you know.
Graham, you have just increased your film street cred by like 1,000-fold by saying A7R11.
Great. That's fantastic. To be honest, he was my favorite part of the most recent Star Wars movie, so I am a big fan.
Oh, man.
Well, it's always cool coming across listeners of our podcast and any other podcast. If like yourself, you'll come across those as well. I'm going to call you Jeremy there, Graham. But yeah, it's just amazing sometimes how there's just this recognition. I know that who's the guy in Chicago, Johnny. You get this all the time, don't you? People make special trips to see you.
Yeah, apparently, and they also call me up randomly in the middle of the day when it's really busy. Sometimes it's crazy. Yeah. I have yet to have anybody arrive on a miniature train, though. That will be the day. That's the day I'm looking forward to. But yes, it's amazing how the virtual world seeps into the real world from time to time. Because I thought this was the real world. I don't know. I'm confused.
Cue Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, this is cool because
very cool.
One thing I'm going to talk about later is I met up with a podcast listener over the weekend, and it turns out that he discovered our podcast after Aid came on because he was a Sunny 16 devotee.
I'm glad we got that. It's interesting you bring that up, actually, Perry, because that does speak to what we're planning to do as the next phase of Sunny 16, which is basically like a film photography Tinder, where people sign up and, would like to film kind of thing, and that's what our next big mission is.
Just take the log out of analog.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks for explaining your position on that issue.
Can you send me the sign-up link for that, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll come on to what's the guy in Hong Kong's called?
Oh, we'll get there.
That was it, Perry. We'll come on to that and your date a little bit later in the show.
Speaking of people's names, wait, how do you pronounce Graham's last name?
It depends.
Yeah. How do you pronounce my last name, Simon?
I thought it was like Lego with a J.
Yeah.
This is sort of reminiscent to what we were talking about earlier in the run up to this show, where we have a name of a group. Oh, I can't name the title now because that will actually give everything away. So I can't do that. We'll have to talk about that one later.
I mean, we can just ask him, right?
I'll be honest. I think one of the people on this call does have a pretty good idea of how you pronounce my name. You two, Johnny and Perry, you were closer. Simon, you were so far away. It's Jago, like Sago or Say Go, but not Jargo or
no
Jago,
idea.
whatever.
I have no idea why I said Jargo. I say Jago in my head, but it just came out Jargo.
Well, I was a bit insulted, but never mind. That just makes me think you were thinking of a blooming villain from Shakespearean plays, but that's fine.
Yeah, he was singing Ninjago.
Every time I see your profile picture with that hoodie dark look and then your surname attached to it, I don't know why, but I get a mental image of a British juggalo.
Okay, I've got to go now.
That's what Jago's
insulting.
Yeah, I'm not doing well with names this week. I've already forgotten two of my co-hosts, and I can't say Jago right either. Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's all right, Simone.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's move on to our next message from Matt Jones.
Right.
Graham.
Matt Jones, go on. Yeah. Okay, you want me to? Okay, 1 second. Okay, Matt Jones. So this is the first comment I understand that you've had on your new YouTube channel.
It is. We're really proud of this. So thank you, Matt.
That's very good. So Matt comments, "Nice show, lads, and I appreciate the Chicago food do's and don'ts. It sounds like I must watch this. If I ever visit, it won't be such a steep learning curve." What are the Chicago food do's and don'ts?
Don't get shot while you're eating. That's
pro tip.
Yeah, that's the pro tip. Don't get shot while you're eating your food in Chicago.
Good. Yeah. I feel like I've got that's a learning curve I've climbed now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I move on to this next email from James Thorpe? This is an email. James writes in, say, "What a pleasure to hear Mike Novak again. Not that he was allowed to speak the first time. Aside from his encyclopedic knowledge of all things camera and hot dog related, I have to say he has one of the most soothing voices I've heard. He really should be reading audiobooks. Or maybe doing some of those ASMR videos. Maybe you could get him doing some of those on your YouTube channel. Thanks again for another great podcast. Next time I'm in Chicago, I'll be sure to pop by Central Camera to pick up some restaurant recommendations." Have I misunderstood what your podcast is about? Because it seems to be mostly about food.
I don't know where I got the impression that we talk about food on the podcast, but
there is a PS one. By the way, Johnny, apparently there's a liquor that's only available in Chicago, and it sounds like just the kind of kerosene and cough syrup concoction that I love. Ever tried Jeppson's Malort?
Yes. We didn't have any when Mike was in town, but it was discussed, and then we all pretend to forget that we pretended to forget that it got discussed so that we wouldn't have to drink it.
What is it?
I'm trying the best description I ever heard of Jeppson's Malort was that if a nasty prostitute was a liqueur, it would be called Jeppson's Malort. I don't know. I'm not sure how else to describe it, but that to me was the best description. I can put a link in the. I can put a link in the
prostitutes that Johnny knows.
Yeah, exactly. I can put a link to, the Jeppson's Malort faces. There's a whole thing on YouTube, since we're talking about YouTube, of people who do a shot and then they film them after immediate, while ingesting the shot, and they all make this face that just says, God, if this tastes like a nasty prostitute. I mean, it's like
it's getting worse.
Yeah. So I can put the video on in the show notes, because there's really not a way to describe how rancid this stuff is.
Can I just double check something? This is a Classic Lenses podcast, not a Sunny 16 podcast I'm on right now, isn't it? Because I really need to know whether I should have been muting all of that last section.
I think it will actually go out. So what can you say? There was no particularly strong swear words from Johnny this time. There was one earlier, but the rest of it, well, what can you say, was all factual.
Yeah, this is all factual.
I was going to say, before you jump onto the last thing that we've got for you there, Graham, I just wanted to say that I've had a few conversations with Mike in chats in various places on the internet this week, and I just generally, every time he said something I didn't particularly like, I've just been trolling him with a gif of a hot dog with ketchup on it, a spinning one. And it's been driving him nuts. So because that's the way that really hot dogs are meant to be had, with just ketchup.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around the idea that there would be audio books read by people with Chicago accents, and that anybody would want to actually hear that.
Well, that was the point. I don't know who it was, but I mean, we've had probably more correspondence about that show than any other, and it was almost all food related. It's a case of like, why do we bother talking about cameras and lenses? But I think one of my favourite comments there was just how you, Johnny, apparently continued into this slip into a broader and broader Chicago accent as the show went on.
Yeah, it does happen. It happens when you get more than more than two of us together, the locals. The accent comes out. It's just the way it works. Yeah, it's like the super fans thing with the Coach Dicka. That thing. Have you guys ever seen that? You probably have never seen that. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can watch the video about the guys talking about Coach Dicka.
Right. Okay. Well, just before we finalise these with Graham, we're going to move on to coffee donations, and I'm going to read a couple of these out. So I just want to give thanks. Say thanks to Shire Morrison, who donated to us this week on coffee.com. Just search for Classic Lenses Podcast, and if you want to donate to us, it will be great. And he sent 4 coffees! ! One extra for Mike, as it was excellent to listen to him and hear, and and also to hear about the Ektar Xenon link, which was good to know. Lawrence Dunn dropped us something. Nigel Cliff did the same again, and he wrote to us, nothing insightful or pithy to say this week. Thank you, Nigel. And James Thorpe also donated to us as well. But we do actually have a star donation, donation and comment this week, which, Graham, it would be great if you could do it justice.
It's an absolute honour, actually, to read this one out, because, for one thing, it's from a good friend of myself and of the show, from Jeremy North, which is always lovely to read something out from Jeremy. Also, it is the most prescient. I think Jeremy might be psychic, because this comment very much makes it feel like he does. And say, you have the best guests and the best banter. Well, thank you. I'm assuming that what's put us at Sunny 16 into second place is things like having, Simon and Johnny come on our shows, and has really lowered the guest bar. Obviously, because this is Jeremy, this is a complisalt, so there is a follow-up to the nice bit. Please ask Perry to stop saying like every other word. Is thing you can do, Perry?
He is mishearing me. I'm not saying like, I'm saying like like one of those Mr. Burns, Boo Earns situations.
So you're just giving us subliminal messages every week, and I must admit, I've never picked up on this liker, So that's a good one.
Yeah, this is what happens, Simon, when you let millennials onto your podcast. This is why, actually, I think Rachel's a millennial. But as the two men, we try not to let the woman speak on the podcast, and that really brings that problem down. So.
Right. Well, I think on that note, let's move things on to the real reason why you're on the show with us at this moment, because you're not actually going to be here for much longer, on this show at least, anyway.
I dialed into this show to get the results from my recent doctor's appointment. Doesn't sound like they're good.
So what it's about is, we've talked a few times now about this Konica lens that is clearly too cheap for Perry to enjoy. that wasn't you, Graham, was it?
Out the window.
I thought you just collapsed on us there. So we got this Konica 40mm 1.8, which was the lens that our listeners voted that we should go out and buy and send to Perry and make him enjoy it. And he says he's enjoyed it, but he's quite happy to see the back of it and give it away to a listener. Now, we asked for suggestions because only an idiot would have a photo competition on a podcast. Because I mean, come on.
But at least when we do this, we get a guest on who's actually qualified to speak about the topic.
Very true.
I like power lines in my subject matter.
Yeah, if anybody has not listened to Johnny on the Sunny 16 podcast, or 2 episodes of the Sunny 16 podcast talking about landscape photography, which he knows nothing about, for probably about 5 hours. I don't know can you remember what the episode numbers were? Was it earlier on this year at least, wasn't it? I think
it was about 110 through 116. I think I can't remember, I'm afraid. It must have been. It was last year, because it was shortly before we brought in an entirely new podcast. Because doing those podcasts with Johnny made us realise that this has got out of hand. We need to truncate this in some way. So yes, I think it was. It must have been about this time last year, I think, Johnny. Maybe.
I believe it. I believe it was, if my bladder recalls correctly.
Yeah, you haven't urinated since then, have you?
No. I got rid of that terrible infection I had from holding it for so long, and then peeing into a cup under the desk while I was speaking. That wasn't too too good for me health wise.
I'm assuming you just went with a bag when you went on the Negative Positives podcast.
Yeah, I just wore the bag. Yeah, I wore the bag, and now I typically wear Depends every time I go on a podcast. It solves that problem.
Okay, well, we had suggestions.
I love it when Simon gets that sound in his voice, like, I can't believe this podcast was my idea. I can't believe I put these people in contact with each other and brought them on this podcast. Because look at the chaos that's ensuing.
Yeah.
I love that when he gets that sound in his voice.
Yeah.
Well, now that you're in our podcast.
To be fair, for Johnny, it is the wee small hours of the morning.
I need to move this on. So we invited our listeners to come up with a better way of giving this lens away, because we could not. Because we couldn't think of one, and Robbie Jameson did actually drop me a line somehow, and we lost that communication. I have no idea where he went to, but he did actually suggest at the time, this is quite a few weeks ago, about coming up with some kind of poetry to do it, and which definitely seemed to be the best idea that we could have come up with. But we put it out there for the rest of our listeners, and there was a pretty staggering response. Probably half of them by Lawrence Dunn, there were some great ideas in there, some more dubious ideas, but the idea that caught our attention the most was by James Cleveland, which is a variation of Rob Jameson's idea, and that will be to have a haiku competition, and that was also seconded by Ben Reynolds as well. So we thought, yeah, that's a good idea, and which then had to go away and thinking, well, what actually is a haiku? And I think on that note, I'm going to hand over to Graham, because Graham's quite learned in this field.
Yeah, I am, and I'm. To be honest, I am literally in this field as we sit and record this. I'm sat on the wall in a field in the rain. This is what I'm doing for you guys. So yeah, for people who don't know, haiku is it's actually a Japanese word. It's a Japanese word for a small, boring poem, and it's been around for a very long time, since at least the 1960s. And the best way of thinking about them is that they're a bit like a limerick, only they're even shorter. They're not really funny, and they don't tend to have people from Nantucket in them. So if you can just picture that now, I think you've got a good idea of what haiku is. They are 3-line poems. So the great thing is with haiku is that they're perfect both for pretentious people, because it's poetry, and lazy people, because they're really short. So the structure is, it's done in syllables. So the structure is 5 syllables, then 7 syllables in the second line, and then 5 syllables again. And you're trying to conjure up a kind of emotive scenes and phrases to give you a feeling of place, of where you are. I think that's the general idea historically. You can sort of go back and read some of the traditional Japanese ones. They are quite boring.
Graham, we've lost you. Come back, Graham.
No, he can stay.
But not
so
very
boring.
exciting. So check that out.
Oh, you're back. You're back. We lost you there after you said that Japanese haikus are boring.
Okay, well, that's enough. How much of the Japan?
That was enough of a hole, was it?
So yeah, well, was that enough of a description?
Yeah, and they don't have to rhyme.
And they don't have to rhyme. No.
But if they do, rhyming the
good for you.
Well, exactly. If you can get the first and the last line to rhyme, well done. But don't rhyme the middle line. Just the first and the third, or else.
I mean, to be fair, nobody ever rhymes haikus. That's not a thing. Again, you're confusing haikus with limericks. Don't do that. That will be the next giveaway competition. Will be limericks, and will feature many people from Nantucket.
Oh, do you have an example of a haiku, Graham?
Okay, hang on a second. I did this earlier. I will find mine now, because I said I'm on the phone and it's in the rain, and phones and rain are not a great combination.
Well, in that case, I could always just go straight over to our Asia correspondent, who will naturally have the best haiku.
That's racist.
No.
Oh yeah, that was bad. Oh.
You want me to read it? I'm not.
I said I didn't say Asian. I said Asia.
I fail to see the difference.
Very racist.
I do have a haiku ready. Although I'm not entering the competition, so I don't know why you made me do this. But do you want me to read it in like my best Japanese haiku voice?
Absolutely.
We'll also play some like Zen music in the background. 4 cm pancake. Not a very good breakfast, but pretty nice lens.
That's good. I was wondering where that was going, but that came together quite nicely at the end. Well done.
Thank you. It took me 2 minutes while I was taking it.
Yeah. Well. Okay. Well. How about you, Johnny? Have you done one? Because I know you're not exactly a fan of these giveaways, are you?
You know I did one. You know I did one, Simon. And I am not going to read it. You can read it if you like.
Oh, I haven't got it.
But it'll sound better in your voice.
It's even better with Graham's, but it's lost. I don't know where it is.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah. Never mind. One day it will surface.
I'll find it and drop it in the chat if you really would like me to do that.
Or we can always put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we can do that.
Hang on, are we letting Johnny not read his haiku here? Is that what's happening?
It's lost. We don't know where it is.
That sounds like bullshit.
Oh, somebody look who found it. All right, there you go. Graham, if you'd like to do the honors, it's going to sound better when you read it. So,
okay, here we go. Lens giveaways suck. Make the summer bitches buy them. Jeremy Greenthumb. I feel that was crafted just for my appearance. Thank you.
It was.
Yeah.
And what do you know about that?
I must admit, the first time I saw you put that on, I just thought it was some kind of statement. I didn't even know it was a haiku.
Yeah,
and then after writing the haiku, I recognised it for the art form that it was.
See.
And now having Graham actually read it out, I now actually understand the last line.
Context is everything.
Everything.
Okay, well, I'll do mine. Here we go. This is my first ever haiku. Okay, the challenge is set. A Konica will be free. Just write a haiku.
Simon's managed to write a marketing haiku. Wonderful. Okay, I found mine now. Here we go. Streets alive with joy. Pictures tedious drivel. eBay has answer. I wrote that, guys, thinking of you. wrote that thinking of you guys.
That was quite deep, and again, I did see that earlier. I didn't quite get it until you actually read that, and it makes so much more sense now. It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
I think what you've managed to demonstrate there between all of those haikus is that haikus can be any old rubbish thrown together as long as it falls within or close to that format.
Exactly. I mean, I googled this because I had no idea what a haiku was. And there are some very easy to understand tips about writing haikus. So just Google it or whichever search engine that you use, and it sort of, you'll get some ideas about how to make these things hang together. The other thing is, of course, it's quite a challenge to make a good haiku, but it's probably less of a challenge to do a bad haiku. We don't really mind whether the haiku is good or bad as long as it's interesting. I mean, we've not actually fully discussed what exactly kind of haiku we want. I'm of the opinion that it needs to be relevant to either the lens giveaway, classic lenses, the podcast, something on those lines. I know that one person, I can't remember who said it there, in the I think it might have actually been James Cleveland who actually suggested in the first place, who suggested that it must be about gear, none of this photography stuff. I don't know what your view is on that one, Johnny.
Sorry, I zoned out. I was looking.
I
at
thought so.
Princess Bride.
That's why I pounced the question on there. I was just saying that. Was it James Cleveland suggested that the haiku should be about gear and not about photography?
You want me to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's your kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. You mean like we could actually talk about photography and not gear?
Yeah,
like that. Yeah, that's my thing. Yeah.
That's okay.
It'll never catch on.
No. Okay, well, the idea is going to be that Graham will be back, we think. And and
then we'll talk about photography. I get it now. I get it now. There okay. Yeah. Well, Graham, will you come back and talk about photography with us?
I would love to come back and talk about photography with you guys. Yeah, absolutely. Can I just say also, with regards to content for the haikus, as I'm going to be coming back to help with the judging of this, I respond really well to pandering, so just bear that in mind.
So yeah, this competition, we haven't got a firm date on this, but we're going to give you plenty of time. So it will probably be going out first week of October, maybe something like that. But what we'll do, we'll put something in the Facebook group, the Classic Lenses Podcast Facebook group, just as a reminder what this is going to be, and we'll give updates as well as to when the actual closing date is. But you've got at least 3 weeks anyway, so we're going to give you plenty of time, and it could be a little bit longer than that.
And so I have to shoot with the lens more during that period, right?
Yes, more photos, preferably in the daytime when you're not trying to find problems with it.
Okay.
And you got to get a Konica.
Oh, no, dude. I'm not going to do that.
Where are people submitting these entries, Simon?
Oh.
See,
that's radical, isn't it? I think we should have them sent to our Gmail address, which is classiclensespodcast@gmail.com. That's going to be the best way. Then we can keep them all in one place.
Yeah.
Sounds like a very good and organised plan to me. As somebody who has badly run competitions before, the one thing you learn is get everybody put stuff in the same place, or repent forever.
That's it. Well, I think we should now say thank you, Graham. I
think you should too.
Yes, for being with us, for being such a sport as well. So thanks for joining us for the last, I don't know, half an hour or so, actually, maybe a bit more. And I'd be really looking forward to you coming back on. And we've also got some thoughts about the things that we're going to be talking about when you come back on as well, because you've got a bag of lenses or something on those lines that you need some help with, I believe.
I do. I have got a bag of lenses. Well, not a bag. I don't keep my lenses in the bag. I'm not that much of a savage. But I've got, as one does, I've accrued lenses over the time. I don't know whether any of them are good, which ones I should be using, because you tend to just stick with the ones, this goes on here. And I would love to get some input on, no, you really should be trying this more, and try it with this and try it with that. So I would love some input on that. That'd be really helpful for me.
That's good. And just to help the conversation along, especially with Johnny, could you go out and buy a full frame Sony camera so you can actually work out, just how these lenses are really meant to work in the meantime?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As one of, like you, as a fellow sellout podcast, I'll just take some of our massive pot of coffee money and just buy myself a new full frame Sony. That's my plan.
Excellent. All right.
As you said, guys, I've actually just seen a rabbit trying to steal some of my petunia, so I have got to go now. So next time I'll call you from the recording studio rather than a garden in the rain that I'm working from. But thanks for having me, guys. Catch you there. Bye.
Bye. Thank you again.
Bye.
Thanks, Graham. Bye.
Okay. Right, now, before we go any further in the podcast, I've yet to say thank you to Mike Novak. I mean, we talked about him a few times already, but thanks, Mike, for being on the show last week. It was great to hear, great to have that culinary journey through Chicago last week. Really enjoyed that. So, and also that chat about cameras as well. There's some good stuff in there. So thanks again there, Mike. And one more thing that I've just realised, there was one other piece of correspondence that came through, and this is actually one of the things that can be a problem sometimes. If anybody communicates with me in particular and want regarding the podcast, it's always best to do it via email, because if it comes through on Twitter or Instagram, there's a very good chance I'll forget about it at the point of where we're sitting here at the moment. But we did have one more thing to read out from Scott Graham on Twitter, and so I'm going to hand over to you, Johnny.
Right. This is from Scott. How do you? Can I ask a question? Technical question, real quick.
Yeah.
Seeing as how Jared. Yeah. I was going to be about the Graham thing because Graham has just left us, but we have a question from Graham. Is there a slight difference in pronunciation between Graham and Graham?
No, well, that second pronunciation is utterly alien to me.
Is it like Vlad and Vlad?
It could be, but it's God, I'm really awful with names this week. Homemade Camera Podcast. Is it Graham? It's Graham, isn't it? Yeah, that guy Graham on the Homemade Camera Podcast. He says it in the way that you just said it that time. I can't even say it in the way that you do it.
Like the cracker.
Or Takamar.
No. Like when Johnny says Graham, it's like graham crackers.
Yeah, just like that. And whereas I make no distinction.
Okay.
I can't recall, certainly in Britain, anybody making a distinction in the pronunciation of Graham, whether it be spelt one way or another.
Okay.
Wait, so do you guys eat graham crackers?
We have.
I'm in Chicago.
Jacobs.
I eat graham crackers.
Well, we have Jacobs crackers, so I don't know about Graham crackers, but I would say they were Graham.
All right.
All right. I'm glad we got that out of the way.
This is why we call him Jeremy on the Sunday 16. It just removes the problems, doesn't it?
Yeah. So this is from Scott Graham on Twitter. I totally get what you mean about perspective from different formats relative to equivalent field of view. Maybe the compression of longer lenses on larger formats is what we mean, but it's definitely real.
Well, I think with that tweet from Scott Graham pretty much puts everything to bed now, and I think we can move on now. Do you reckon that's the case, Perry?
So while you were sleeping, dreaming sweet, peaceful dreams, Hamish, I guess, was up in the middle of the night listening to our podcast, Hamish Gill, and he actually commented on this thread from last week's show where he basically says he's listened to the first few minutes and then he couldn't take it anymore. Well, I'll read it. To quote, he says, "I've got a few minutes in, so sorry if you actually come to a conclusion, but I can't listen to Simon not getting focal length / format size anymore. It's genuinely starting to make me feel anxious. Simon, watch this video." And then he posts a link, which then explodes into a excessively long chat between Ben Reynolds, Hamish, and myself. I mean, no, the compression is not a real thing. But like, the funny thing is, Hamish started messaging me privately to talk about this, and then we started talking about 3D pop and stuff. And he was just like, I could see the veins on his forehead like coming through the text, to the point where I was on my way to work, and then he was like, Perry, can I call you? You want to call me from the UK to get it off his chest?
Well done, Simon.
Look what you've done.
Yeah. Well, obviously, this is actually the first time I've seen this thread, so I need to go away and read this thread, look at the videos, read all the articles, and so on and so on. So perhaps within this thread in the Classic Lenses podcast group, which is from the main post from last week's podcast there, so episode 83, I will go away and read these things, and if I don't understand it, or all the things that are said there just disagree with me, then I will take this to the large format photography podcast, the next episode, because we have a learned guest on the next show, and we're actually going to be inviting people to ask questions about large format photography. So I think I might write into that show and put the question to, I think his name's Sandea. I think that's how you pronounce his name, Sandea Lynch.
You get to write into your own show.
I think I might have
Can
to.
we do that?
I'll do it under a pseudonym, I think.
Asking for a friend.
Exactly, and I'll ask that question, and be interesting to see what answers get, because as I say, as Ricardo Bayon picked out in the summary of last week's show, I think I said something on the lines of about this discussion about compression and the fact that it might not be about compression at all. And because all of the things that people say to me, they all make sense, and I agree with, and I can see that there's this f-stoppers thing about how lens compression and perspective works. I know what that's talking about. But it's whether or not that addresses my specific point. And Hamish is there at the moment. It does. Yeah, but it might do, Hamish. So this is why we do these shows. We do these things to learn or to get things into my thick head. The world is a better place eventually. So we will get to the bottom of this one, and we already have done. But there you go.
I am curious that if you and Scott Graham are talking about something, I mean, like, there are differences in the way that large format and other formats look, for sure. But perspective is not one of them with the camera in the same position. So this whole compression, distortion, perspective thing is a non-starter. But if you guys are talking about some kind of perceptible difference, I'm super curious to know what you guys are actually referring to, because it's definitely not this compression nonsense.
Just to reiterate the point, I'm saying that you'd look at an old photograph that was perhaps taken in the 30s or something like that of a historical location that you can go to today, and you turn up there with your smartphone or whatever device it is, and you try and replicate the shot. I'm saying that I believe that you're not going to be able to manage it. You'll get an approximation of it, but it just won't quite look the same. And I'm not talking about depth of field here now, and that kind of look. I'm talking about, I believe that you won't be able to just like overlay a cropped version of that shot over the other photograph.
Really?
That's my.
This
belief.
is what you've been on about this whole time?
Yeah, is that not perception?
I don't know, because I have a photo that I took when I was in Germany of my grandfather standing in front of his grandmother's house, and this photo is circa 1910. And I took another photo from the same place, and I've done exactly this, and it's they fit right together.
Yeah.
There was a drum roll then in my head. I was thinking, come on, say it, Johnny. It was not the same. I couldn't do it. Well, clearly you were both using the same format to take the photograph. That's the only explanation.
The photograph of my grandfather in 1910 was taken with a Canon DSLR, of all things. I mean, who would have known?
I think there may have been something out there that were approximated to APS-C in Canon size with a 1.6 crop against today's full frame. So that's not conclusive proof to me. I'm sorry, but I will put this question, and hopefully we'll put this question to bed if people don't keep on writing in, and we'll be able to move on. So there we go. So apologies to Hamish again.
A number of episodes ago, shortly after I joined you guys as a host, I remember briefly bringing up the topic of perspective and going on this kind of little mini rant about how it has nothing to do with focal length. And back then, Simon, your response was like, "Ooh, this is a huge can of worms." And I remember sitting there thinking, what are you talking about? No, it's not. And now I see.
You found it out now.
I'm surrounded by worms. I can't find any of my lenses. Just worms everywhere.
Yeah, it's a case of when you finally understand that the world is flat, as I understand it, then these things start to make far more sense.
At least I can go fishing with them.
Right. Okay. So let's move on. I feel like we haven't even started the show yet. Perry, what have you been up to this week?
Oh, okay. So let's start the podcast. It's been a cool. it's been a pretty cool week for me. I'm not going to talk about food. On Saturday, I had a pretty cool day where I met up with a member of the Classic Lenses podcast Facebook group. He's a listener of the podcast. His name is Jean-Marc Duong. I think that's how you pronounce the surname. And he got in touch with me just to kind of meet up and go shoot. And it turns out that he used to listen to, he still listens to Sunny 16. And as I mentioned when Graham was here, he discovered the Classic Lenses podcast when Aid came on the show.
I was just going to say, the way he said, like, he still listens to it, you made it sound like you're surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no comment.
Well, I still listen to the Sunday 16 podcast.
Yeah,
anyway.
me too. Me too. I was going to tell Graham to try putting more of his lenses in toilet rolls because that's what their episode this week was about. So it turns out anyway that Jean-Marc, he literally lives like down the road from me, a 5-minute walk. So we met up and we went for a little photo walk. He brought his Leica M6, his black one, because apparently he also has two, and his silver one he got because he agrees that silver lenses belong on silver cameras and not on black cameras. So it's not just me. And we went to, so he had his M6. He had a couple of really interesting lenses. He had a Zeiss ZM35f2 Biogon, one of those MS Optic lenses. I can't remember which one, not the new 51.5, but one of the previous ones. And those are weird looking lenses, I gotta say.
I think they look so sexy.
Yeah, they're
really
cool.
Yeah, I do.
Some of them. I don't like the way the pancake, the 28 millimeter apoqualias look.
It's totally bizarre.
But some of the remade ones, like the Sonitar and the Varioprasma, as he calls it, they're kind of interesting. So he had one of those, but then he also had a what was it? Oh, a lens that I wanted to try for a long time. It's a Topcon or Tokyo Optical, as it's labeled, Simlar 51.5, which he picked up on eBay because it wasn't labeled Topcon. It was labeled Tokyo Opt, like OPT.
Huh.
And it was just listed with that description. So he got it for a really good price.
I might just have to bleep that out until I get one now. that's way too good a tip to give away.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rare lens. It's highly sought after by collectors. It goes for pretty high prices here in Hong Kong. So it sounds like he got a pretty sweet deal on it. And it's a really weird lens because if you look at a diagram for the lens, it's a 51.5, which he's collecting. And the front group of the lens, it's a sonar design. And then the rear groups of the lens are double Gauss, which like makes no sense, right? So most of the pictures that I've seen online from this lens look really kind of mushy and weird. But I had a chance to shoot it with a roll of Cinestill, and the results came out pretty nice. But it is just one of those lenses that I really do not want to buy, but I really, really wanted to try. So huge shout outs to Jean-Marc for letting me try out that lens. And when I was playing with that lens on my M4, I let him try my 35 Summicron on his M6. And wow, I mean, if you could see gas kicking in on someone's face, that's the look that he had on his face, because he had one little feel of that focus tab, and he just kind of looked up and turned to me and went, "Oh, this is nice." Yeah. So that was super cool. I mean, it's I don't know how many listeners we have here in Hong Kong, but I know we have at least a couple. Mike Epstein is here in Hong Kong. Jean-Marc is. I know there's a couple of more. So this is my first time. No, my second time meeting up with a listener to go and shoot. But Devlin Cook, who I met up with last time, doesn't actually live here. So that was super cool. Yeah.
Awesome. It sounds like you got some scope there for a proper classic lenses walk meetup thing.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we have enough of a community here with people like Vishal from Camera Film Photo and some of the guys from these local photography collectives and photography groups who are also into classic lenses, who I think that's totally doable. Absolutely. It would be super cool.
Yeah, that'd be great. There was a sort of, I guess I could call it an unofficial event that happened last year with Nigel Stanley, and I think Gazer Singer went along to it. But it'd be great if we could actually organise something over here in the UK. But it's just like where to hold it, because I don't think too many people. Well, I think holding it, say, locally where I am is probably not the best place. I mean, there are certainly things to actually take here, but they're a bit spread out, whereas like some of the major cities, there could be something good to happen. So, I mean, we did actually talk about this, I think, last year, and there were a couple of suggestions, and it nearly went to something. And then it went away again. So I'll put the word out again if somebody wants to do something like that in the UK, and it's not too far away for me, because that's the other issue, of course. Then I'd like to take part in that.
Yeah, and if there's any other listeners in Hong Kong, I mean, Johnny had his fun meetup with the Novakian Photo Walk a couple of weeks ago. So if there are other listeners in Hong Kong who are just, who aren't active in the group or anything, hit me up and we'll go shooting. Yeah,
cool.
While we were doing this shoot, two quick things. Number one, I had a bit of a revelation, which I think Johnny has mentioned before. But I was shooting a bunch of Cinestill, and it dawned on me that this stuff looks incredible at certain times of day. Because normally I've been shooting it as a nighttime lens where there's only been artificial light. But recently, the last couple of weeks, I've been shooting it in that kind of hour and a half long period right before sunset.
Ooh, yeah.
Where the light is either gently golden or even better when it's blue. And that combination of fading blue light and then the artificial lights that are turning on around the city just looks unbelievable.
Yeah.
Because normally the when I shoot it at night, like the shadows are just black and pure darkness. So I have to find scenes or things that are reasonably well lit by the artificial light, so I don't just have the lights and then blackness in the image. But when you have that, that little bit of twilight or that little bit of pre-dusk light that's just glowing across the sky, everything looks amazing. Yeah. You get the contrast in colors between the blue and then the more tungsten-y or neon colors in Hong Kong. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's that. I think I've talked about that transitional lighting where it's kind of it's in between. It's not quite dark and it's not quite daylight. Yeah, that in between thing is amazing. And I've been saying this for over a year. I meant to do it last year, but like we are now approaching this moment here in Chicago where the light in September is like that. Like it's the best time of year to do that type of photography. And I really want to get out with, I have a couple rolls of Cinestill in 120, and I'd really like to get out and shoot a few particular things in exactly that light. Because it's really special on that film.
And the wonderful thing about shooting in that light is if you are shooting medium format or a slower lens, it's okay because you do have the ambient light where you can shoot at f4 or even at 5.6 at 800. Yeah. Whereas when I'm shooting at night, I'm like at 1/30 or 1/60 wide open on the fastest lens I can grab.
Yeah.
So it makes focusing much easier. Yeah, I want to do that on my X-Pan soon because the difficulty shooting that at night in the pitch darkness and artificial light is it's an f4 lens. But under this lighting, it's fine. And it's not golden hour because if you have sort of direct sunlight with Cinestill, you get too much halation.
Yeah,
in the highlights.
It's different, isn't it?
Yeah, but when you have sort of buildings or even clouds that are shading the direct light, and then that cool glow of the fading daylight. Oh, it's so nice. So that is the best time to shoot this film. I've been doing it wrong.
Well, there's something I've been thinking of doing, but I've shot a roll of Fuji 250D. Recently. Recently I've had it processed, and we processed it at the 6 Towns Darkroom, which I'm a member of, and it's the first time we've actually done C41. Now, Fuji 250D is actually a cine film with remjet on it, which I assume that's more or less the same kind of thing, effectively as the Cinestill, except the Cinestill has already had the remjet removed, hasn't it? And I think it's also tungsten balanced as well, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, the 800T is. Yeah.
And so this 250D stands for daylight, but the actual process you're meant to use for this is ECN2. But you can do it in C41 once you've removed the remjet, which is pretty much what we did. And doing it that way, you tend to get a bit of a blue cast on the shots, and which in my shots, I don't think the blue cast really showed through that much, but it was definitely there when I played around with color balance. Actually, I need to thank Josh from our group for scanning them on his Pack-On scanner as well. So he emailed those across to me, so I've just used them as they come. But if you played with the white balance and just give them a little bit more warmth in there, it took them closer to perhaps what it was like in reality, but it didn't do it quite right, and it just looked better with that hint of blue in it. But that got me thinking when I was doing that. I was thinking, well, this actually might be quite interesting doing this with artificial light. And just to see how that actually works and see if you get a Cinestill kind of look, because it's already got that blueness to it. Although thinking about it, am I actually thinking about that completely wrong? Because
a little bit, because sort of, because with it's like shooting a digital camera with tungsten white balance in natural light versus daylight white balance in tungsten light, right? That's the sort of color cast ish that you're gonna get. Yeah. But the color cast looks good, so I think you should definitely leave it in. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I'm definitely going to give that a go. And then I was thinking about which camera should I use, and taking things back to Konica. As far as film cameras, I mean, I like using my Contax cameras in particular, but I've only actually got one really fast Contax lens, and the rest of them are 2.8. So I was thinking, well, what else have I got? And I've got my Konica 57 1.2, and I've got a 40 1.8 somewhere. I can't actually find it at the moment. I hope it wasn't the one I sent to you, Perry. But yeah, so I've got a 40 1.8 somewhere, and I was thinking, well, that's probably a good enough camera to do it. Because I've got a Konica FS1, which is one of the later cameras which uses modern batteries. AA's actually uses, but it's got a motor. In fact, I think it's the first 35mm SLR camera with a built-in motor wind on it. It came out just before the Contax 137MA, if memory's correct. So I've got one of those. So I've got two fast lenses, but the other thought that came into it was the 57 1.2 is a radioactive lens, and it's got that yellowy, subtle yellowness to it. So I've de-yellowed it to a degree, but I'm now thinking, well, that's actually going to potentially balances the film completely, quite possibly. So I may just do that for some daylight stuff, and then also try and get out and do some blue hour and maybe some nighttime stuff as well. Yeah,
because you're not going to get the same kind of halation that you do in Cinestill, because you don't have you have the remjet layer on, right?
No. Sorry. Yeah. When you're taking the shot, yes.
Yeah. So my question actually for both of you is, I have two rolls of Kodak 500 Vision T 500 film in my fridge that someone gave me for free. I have no idea when they expired. They're self-rolled, and I want to shoot them, but I don't want to send them to a lab for ECN2 because the film might be dead. So if I want to develop them C41 myself, how do I remove the remjet?
There are two ways, to my knowledge, at least. Anyway, one, there is a commercial product out there just called Remjet Remover or something like that. So you might be able to find that. I don't know if you can get hold of that in Hong Kong or not, but it's certainly worth speaking to your chemical suppliers out there. And there's another way, and this is what we were going to do at the dark room, and then Josh actually came along with a bottle of the proper stuff, if you like. And I'm trying to find what the chemical is. It's not bicarbonate soda, but it's something similar.
Right, I've heard of people using baking soda.
But it's something similar to baking soda, but it's not baking soda.
Okay.
It's almost a variant of it. I think if you actually do something to baking soda, then it becomes this, or the other way around. I'm just trying to find the actual chemical. Sodium hydroxide. Yeah, was it sodium sulfate? Oh, I don't know. Getting confused there. I think it's sodium hydroxide. And when you start, I think it's sodium hydroxide. I think. And there are different versions of that as well, so it's worth getting onto Google and just looking at. There are some blog posts with some tips on how to do that, and you've got to warm it up. I think some people do it at like 55 degrees and give it a good shake in and so on. This stuff that we used, you literally just put it in for 30 seconds without actually specifically getting it up to any kind of hot temperature, although we took it up to 38 degrees simply because everything else was going to be done at 38 degrees. So we thought, well, let's do this at 38 degrees. And it was a little bit of a pain to deal with at the time because we were doing everything on a Jobo. And so we were doing 7 rolls at the same time. And I think it was using like 3 Jobo tanks all daisy chained together. And so getting, cleaning it out, washing it out with water is not the easiest thing, especially when you're trying to keep the temperature the same as well, which we don't know if we needed to do that or not, but we did. But what happens when you actually empty the tanks out, it comes out in particles, because I thought it was going to like dissolve it in some way and you just be like a liquid that would come out, but it actually comes out in particles. And the instructions were saying, rinse it until the particles are gone, which we did. But when you were still rinsing it, it wasn't coming out pure clean water. It had a tinge to it, so we didn't know where. Well, I thought, well, how long do we carry on doing this for, and are we doing damage to the film or not? So that was a bit of a question mark. But the pictures came out okay. In fact, some of them came out very, very well. I was very, very pleased with them. But I don't actually know whether or not we should have carried on or we should have done it less. It's tough to know.
Okay, because I've just read so much. I've read about people just developing it normally in C41 and then just wiping the remjet off with their fingers or with a sponge or something. So there's so much conflicting information on the internet, and I don't know, is it going to destroy my Patterson tank? Is it easy? Is it going to be a massive pain? Yeah,
I think the biggest issue is it going to destroy your chemicals, or what's it going to do to you?
I don't care about my chemicals. Yeah. C41 is it's working for me as one shot right now.
Right. Yeah. Well,
I do not care.
Yeah. Well, that is the biggest. Well, from my understanding, is the biggest problem with just putting remjet through that process is it really screws your chemicals up. I think it discolors them. So, or you'll certainly end up with those bits in the process. I don't think that's going to cause you any problem for your Patterson tank or anything like that. I've read those things about giving them a wipe down and all that kind of stuff. Some people say do it, some don't. I don't know if there's a truly definitive way of doing it. Can't really say.
Johnny, have you ever tried that?
No, I can't be bothered to go to that much trouble to do color film.
Yeah,
I can't be bothered when it comes to color film like that. That's just not. It's a bridge too far.
Well, I've got to say when we were doing it, and this was the first time we've actually done C41 at our darkroom club, and Brian Truman, who pretty much organises the club, he brought his Jobo CPE, whatever it is, with a lift. Really impressive piece of kit with a water bath, keeps everything. Like I say, when I say a lift, as in
an elevator.
Don't go with an elevator.
Yeah, okay. Well, with one of those things, and it lifts the tanks up, and the chemicals go out through a tube, and you can collect it. It's an easier way of doing it. It's a very fast way of doing it, and it seemed to take quite a long time to actually get the whole thing set up. In fact, it took an eternity, it seemed, and then sorting out the remjet. It was a pain. Yeah, there was no two ways about it, but it was a pain because we didn't really know what we were doing. We were experimenting. We were reading something on the back of a label and doing it, and really the instructions weren't completely adequate. So when you got something where it leaves some doubt, you sort of you do some things more or less, and so on and so on. But once that remjet was gone, the actual processing of 14 rolls in the Airbus, we did 7 rolls of 250D and 7 rolls of normal C41. And we did 14 rolls in under an hour, which was we couldn't quite get our heads around it. It was amazing.
So, but it wasn't as simple as you're essentially just doing a pre-wash, right?
Yeah, except it's not a simple pre-wash. That's exactly.
Okay.
If you're just doing one roll and you're doing it in a Patterson tank, it'd be a doddle.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Maybe one day I'll actually take these out of my fridge. Try it.
But
Perry,
the look of the shot is worth it. It's worth doing because you're going to get something interesting, definitely.
Yeah. Perry, a quick follow-up question for you, because not only were you shooting Cinestill in that transitional light, but weren't you also shooting with your uncoated lenses?
Yes. Specifically, well, the Simlar is a little coated, but I have been shooting with that Chiyoko 5cm f2.
Yes.
And as I mentioned briefly last time, I've always been nervous about shooting color with uncoated lenses. But it looks really good. And I think
really good.
all of my preconceptions about, I guess I thought, like, if I'm shooting an uncoated lens, I'm just going to get flare and ghosting and muddiness all the way throughout. But what I ended up getting was a very sort of low contrast, smooth tonal gradation that I really, really like in color. And I just wasn't expecting that. And all of my prejudices and preconceptions about uncoated lenses on color in particular, because I know what they look like on black and white, but in color, they've just been smashed.
Yeah. It looks really good. There are a couple of shots that you posted that I thought looked really, really fantastic. And I mean, I've experienced that because I've done a lot of, adapting where I've taken those old lenses and basically put them into focusing mounts and shot them. And I mean, I was always struck by how good the colors look from lenses that were never intended to shoot color film because there was no color film. But I've always been struck at how not only how well they render, but also how nice the color looks, because it does have a very particular sort of muted and natural look to the tones that I find very, very pleasing.
And it's such a nice contrast to the kind of oversaturated digital images that you see today, where the saturation slider has been jacked all the way up. Oh, it almost adds a layer of, when cinematographers talk about why they like old lenses, they often talk about how it creates flare, which then gives almost a visual barrier between the image and the viewer, so that there's like an extra layer of depth. And part of it for me is I think I look at these pictures with the uncoated lenses, and that layer of vintage color that's almost overlaid on top sort of separates the viewer from the image in a way where, like, it doesn't look so clinically real, and I really like that look. Yeah, I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, I think it does make sense. It has I think it's a very particular. It is a very particular look that's different from what we usually see.
Yeah, I'm gonna try it on Portra next.
To see how
that turns out. So, speaking of Portra, by the way, Simon, I mentioned something to you earlier that I didn't tell you, but I'm just going to reveal it on the cast now. I'm going to send you, because you mentioned a while back that you've never shot portrait before. I'm going to send you 2 rolls of portrait. One in 35 mil, one in 120. On the condition that you shoot them immediately and don't let them sit for 10 years to get expired and not shot. And the medium format roll is going to be, I think, portrait 160. And I want you to stick that in your, I'm going to be a dictator here. I want you to stick that in your Hasselblad and take like people pictures of your kids or whoever.
Oh, okay. This is thank you. Oh, that's pressure, isn't it? I was going to say,
don't feel pressure. Just shoot them.
Yeah, well, I was going to say I was gifted a roll of 120 portrait, but it was 400 recently, which is in the fridge, of course. So thank you, Matthew, for that, by the way. Yes, thank you. I will do that, and I will make it a priority to do that. And just as an aside, while we've been on air, Johnny has been posting photographs, including that photograph where there's was your grandfather? Yeah. So you got the picture of Johnny's grandfather in 1910, and then a modern photograph, and this is evidence of these two things being the same. And I'm sorry, there are some pretty startling differences. I was going to say the main one being, there wasn't a Volkswagen Polo there in 1910.
I know. That freaking car was just like, I came all the way to freaking Germany to take the freaking picture, and there's a Volkswagen parked exactly in the spot I need to be.
Yeah. Other things, the windows are different, the plants are different. This isn't evidence. It's a nice try, but it's as relevant as when I had a go at it. So
the perspective is exactly the same.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah, well,
I think I was I'm looking at it, I could have taken like 3 steps to the right, and it would have been a little bit better, but it's the best I could do.
Yeah, you would have had to. Yeah, but you also would have had to have gone closer.
In my hand from 1910.
No, you would have had to have gone closer as well, because that extra the extra length of the focal length of the 1910 shot is just making everything bigger in the background as well. So anyway, we said we weren't going to talk anymore about that, weren't we?
So on that note, to quickly divert, I have one last thing. When I've been out shooting this week, I've actually been using a lens that is been in my arsenal for a long time, and I always bring it with me, but I don't use it as much as I should. It's the 21 millimeter Voigtlander Color-Skopar and M mount, and I just want to sing this lens's praises a little bit, because not only is it the first M mount lens that I actually got it to use on a micro four thirds camera way back in the day.
Oh wow! And
it has stuck with me all this time, and every time I get gas for a 21 millimeter lens, I just come back and say, no, this one does everything I want a 21 millimeter lens to do. I mean, it's tiny, it handles well, it's sharp, and I think it's one lens that is beautiful on every format except like a Sony full frame camera because of the edges. It's wonderful on my Leica rangefinders, obviously. On the Leica CL with the external finder, it's perfect, and I've just been having so much fun with it. And on a Fuji, it is really good because it handles really nicely. The size is perfect on a Fuji, and it gives you about a 32 millimeter field of view.
Yeah.
And then you stick it on micro four thirds, and you got a 42 millimeter lens. So I think it's this one lens that is so versatile, but when you put it on a camera that it's designed for, it's just this great little ultra wide that you can carry around everywhere. I love it.
Yeah, and by crazy coincidence, I've been shooting the same lens this week, actually for about 2 or 3 weeks, because this is the lens I put on my my Bessa L X-Pan, which is also known as the Bessa L with the Minolta panorama mask inserted, and then I've taped over the viewfinder to give me a panoramic field of view. in my viewfinder. So I've been using the same exact lens, just the screw mount version. And yeah, it's funny. I've had this lens a long time as well, which I did also originally get to use on my Fuji mirrorless. Mm-hmm. So I originally bought it for that, and I've kind of hung on to it this whole time, and really enjoy shooting it on the Bessa. Handles really well. It's just so nice and small, and the angle of view is a lot of fun to work with. I actually found on the Fuji, I was never always quite satisfied with it because I feel like the rendering on the Fuji, or at least on digital, has a bit too much midtone. It's a bit flatter through the midtones than, say, like the 15 millimeter Voigtlander or the 25 millimeter Voigtlander. So it to me, it always had a bit of a flatter rendering on digital that I wasn't super fond of. But I think that since I'm shooting it on film, and I've been using Ilford XP2, the tonal range on it is like right in the place where I want now. So yeah, I've been shooting this lens a ton again lately, and I've been really enjoying it, especially with that kind of crop angle of view and that crop format. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, on digital, the flat tonality in the midtones, I think I know what you mean. For black and white, at least, it's very noticeable.
Yeah, it's specifically for black and white. Yeah,
speaking. Yeah, and it it's not a perfect lens. It can flare like crazy in direct light. It's got quite a bit of barrel distortion for people who care about that stuff. But I don't care if I'm shooting ultra wide. Yeah,
it's 21 millimeters. Come on.
Yeah.
Actually, that just reminds me of something there about barrel distortion there. And at one point I was going to talk about it, then decided not to bother. But I see you brought it back up there. I think it's an interesting one, especially with the way you just framed it there about, if you're that bothered about it. Because going back to one of the photos that I took with that 250D, it was in a cattle market. There were no cattle there. It was deserted at the time, and I didn't put the two. I've got two photographs that are very, very similar. One was taken on expired Tri-X, and that was I quite liked that shot. And then I saw it on the 250D a little bit later once I had that processed, and the look of the shot on the 250D was actually what I was trying to achieve with the Tri-X. And I should have actually underexposed the shot, and the shot on my Contax RX with the 35mm Distagon was pretty much exactly how I wanted the photo to look. And when I put the two shots together on my own page, and that got a few questions, or a few comments. One of which was by Johnny Martyr, and he discussed how he was. I think he was basically disappointed with the performance of the Distagon shot, saying there was too much barrel distortion in it, and I carried the conversation on because I thought it was quite interesting because I just didn't see it. I didn't see any barrel distortion at all, and that's largely because I just don't go looking for it.
Yeah,
and I'm not trying to make a criticism there of somebody that would pick out the distortion, because we all take photographs in our own way, and we have the things that are important to us, and I think that for me it's quite possibly a deliberate thing to ignore shortcomings in a lens, because again, that's one of the reasons why a lot of us like to use the older lenses, because we want to have a photograph that, I mean, we call it character, but another way of putting it is it's imperfection in a shot. And I like imperfect shots unless I'm specifically wanting something that is as correct as possible. And I just thought it was an interesting observation, because it was causing Johnny quite some trouble. And even when I look at the shots now, I'm not entirely sure if I'm seeing it, especially when, and I think actually, I think what it could be is the other shot was taken with my collapsible Summicron, and I've got another photograph taken with that lens, and that's got some pretty heavy distortion in there. And I think I'm not sure if it's more about pincushion or barrel distortion. I can never remember the difference there, but I think that Summicron actually is more distorted than the Vistagon.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, and I'm thinking if you perhaps look at those two photographs and that's the Summicron, so that's the correct one, and therefore the other one doesn't look right because it's been compared against something with possibly more distortion. I'm just wondering if that was what was going on there. But again, that isn't really my point. It's a case of it's just interesting how we all take different things from our photography, and we demand different things from our lenses.
Yeah, I think if you can't notice the barrel distortion, then who cares?
Well, that's
my take on it.
Yeah, but there was a shot I took, and I've just mentioned again. I think I put it up there now. I think it's gone into the beautiful grainy mush group of a gate, and it's got vertical lines, and it was taken with the Summicron on the same day as this, on Tri-X, and it's very mushy because the film was, it's well past it, and I think I probably could have processed it a little bit more, more gently. It would have done better for more gentle processing. But there were some vertical lines in that on this gate, and I'm looking at it and thinking, was that gate really that bent? And I don't know. I actually feel like I need to actually make a 20-minute trip to look at this and park up somewhere, possibly pay for parking, to look at this gate again, just to see if those bars are actually bent or not, or whether or not it's just enormous distortion coming from the Summicron.
I don't think that's a good use of your time.
No, I think it's a great use of your time, Simon. Go for it.
Well, I've thought about doing it on several occasions, and I've decided no, I can live with that.
Simon, I think this leads directly to your perspective question. I think what you really need is I think what really you need is a DeLorean with a flux capacitor in it, and you would solve all of your problems because you could go back in time and you could align everything perfectly and it would all be just right.
I've been giving this way too much thought as to how much I'm going to do this test, because one of the things I was thinking, well, it's not as simple as just setting a tripod up and in the same place and swapping cameras. But when I'm going to go out and do a test, I've got to do it for myself and just prove it to myself. And I'm going to go out there and I'm going to use a 90mm 5x4 lens, and I'm going to take a micro four thirds zoom camera. And I know that I can't just put the things on the tripod and just swap the cameras over, because and this is a bit that you can give me some advice, or our listeners can give me some advice here. And the reason why I know I can't just put them on in exactly the same spots is because they're going to be focusing the light in slightly different places. I mean, so once the say the micro four thirds camera that's sitting on my tripod, and where the image is focused on the sensor, if you look down vertically down above me, it's like you're on a drone, and drew a line down where that line is of where the sensor is. If I put my Sinar camera on the tripod at that point, the actual line where my film will be is probably going to be about 6 inches further back. So should I be lining up the film plane, or should I be somehow calculating the point where the light crosses over as it goes through the lens? And so I'm trying to give it some proper thought here, and I don't know if either you guys can help me on that one, or our listeners for that matter.
I don't know. I just want Hamish to be there, and I want him to sell tickets.
So I want to do this in sort of like Paddington Station, which is one I keep on.
Exactly. Yes. Now this is getting better and better, Simon.
I am not going to Paddington Station. It's too far. So I need to come up with something local and to make it work. So
I fully support this activity, Simon. However you make it happen, absolutely.
So like I said, I'm trying to make it scientific. So am I right in thinking that neither of you actually have got the answer to that specific question?
Well, whether you're lining it up with the film plane or like the point where the light I don't even know what that's called in a lens.
Let's call it intersects for argument.
Sure. I have no idea. I don't think it matters that much as long as you don't move too much relative to your subject.
We can't have it woolly. Yeah, because if there's that slight difference, then you'll be saying, well, you should have moved the camera further back or something like that.
Oh, I can't believe we're still on this. What matters is the relative distance, right? So the background doesn't matter because 6 inches is going to be negligible in terms of the percentage change. So as long as your subject in the foreground is not so close to you that 6 inches is going to make a significant difference, then it's okay. It'll be close enough.
Well, I'm thinking of constructing a shot that's got foreground, midground, and background in there. I want to try and get effectively 3 points of reference. So I think it does. I do need to get this one right.
So I don't know.
So listeners, help us out. Hamish, write into the show. Or give Perry a ring.
My gut says that it's the film plane that should remain stationary, but every other part of my body says just keep the tripod still, and it's fine.
Yeah, I'm gonna for if I don't get an answer, I'm gonna go with the film plane. That just seems to make sense because that's the focus.
Oh, then you can graffiti a little film plane symbol on the ground in the station because it looks the same as the London Tube stop station, so no one will notice.
Yeah, that could be what it's all about. Yeah. Okay, so Perry, is that it for your week?
Yes.
I'm wondering now. Do we have time for Johnny's week, Johnny?
I don't even remember my week at this point.
Oh, dear.
Oh, okay. Well, so I have been shooting quite a bit this week, which really started last week. I mentioned that I went on a little photo excursion, for which I have still yet to develop my film, but that's going to happen. I really hope today that it happens. If not, it's going to happen during the week. But so anyway, I continued along this week, and I feel like I've been shooting quite a bit, and I guess I wanted to just maybe talk about what I've been shooting with, because Perry, who apparently keeps track of not only what cameras he's using, but also keeps track of what cameras I'm using, because you basically said earlier this week, Johnny, you need to talk about the fact that you're now using your two cameras that, he basically described exactly what's been in my bag for exactly the past 3 weeks. So what I've been shooting with is a camera that I discussed this camera? I feel like I haven't, because there's more of a backstory behind it, which I'm still not going to tell the whole backstory, but I'm going to talk about the camera. So I've been shooting these past few weeks with a Rollei 35 RF, which is also basically known as a Bessa 2. So it's basically a rebranded Bessa 2 with 40 millimeter. It has a different set of frame lines, right? So the Bessa has 50, 35, and 90 and 75. Is that right, Perry?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, on the switches. Whereas the Rollei 35 has 3 frame lines. It has a 50, a 40, and an 80. And the reason it has those frame lines is because this camera, when it came out, was sold with a line of lenses that went with it that corresponded to those frame lines. So the reason I bought the camera was that I have a 40 millimeter lens, M-mount lens, which I'll talk about at another time. But I bought the camera to go with a lens. So I've been shooting, and this is my first, well, it's not truly my first, but it's the first M-mount camera I've actually kept. So I've been shooting the Rollei RF35 with a 40 millimeter lens attached to it. And I've had that in my bag along with the Bessa L with the panorama mask with the 21 millimeter Color-Skopar on it. So those have been my two go-to cameras in my bag, along with, of course, the Minolta Pocket Panavision Freedom Vista QD Ps, whichever of those names you want to use. So I've had those three cameras in my bag now for the past couple of weeks, and I've really gotten into I feel like a good place with them where I'm getting everything I want to, sometimes you just feel like you've got exactly the right set of tools, right? And I've really felt that way the past a couple of weeks, because I've got a panorama, like the 21 millimeter in pano, sort of like the panoramic, crop is just about perfect. I've experimented a lot with different, lenses in panoramic format of various focal lengths, and I've enjoyed them all quite a bit, but the 21 feels like it's cropping just the right amount of top and bottom relative to its angle of view on the width, and it feels like really, really good. So I feel like it's a combination that is really clicking with me. And I still have, of course, the point and shoot pano in my bag, which I use for taking pictures of bananas that I find on the street and elsewhere for my upcoming book, Banana Panorama. That's pretty much what I've been using it for, is entirely taking pictures of bananas for the past few months. That's a story for another day. But that all said, I do now have a new addition to my lineup that will be vying for space in my bag. And that camera is the Zorky 4K. And this camera, now I already had a Zorky 4K, but it had some problems. The biggest problem being that there's a shutter capping issue, which basically means that unless I hold my hand over the front of the lens or turn the camera towards my body to cover up the lens, when I advance the film, I get a light leak on every single frame, which is not a lot of fun. So I really like that camera, but I was, it had a light leak issue that was made it less than fun to shoot all the time. So Eric sent me direct on the Mons Express. He sent me a Zorky 4K from his collection. So I now have the Zorky 4K, and I now have a lens that arrived that I found on sale at KEH and got a really good deal on, which is a lens that I have had on my want list for a very long time. I mean, probably I would say probably a couple of years, actually. And I've never pulled the trigger on it. But I had a little bit of money saved up from other purchases, other things I've sold. So I had a little bit of money I could use towards this lens, and that is the Voigtlander Snapshot Skopar. So the 25 millimeter f4. And this is the lens with the click stops at 1 meter, 1.5 meters, and 3 meters. And is not rangefinder coupled, thus making it the Snapshot Skopar as opposed to the Color-Skopar. So this lens is going to live on the Zorky 4K because, as we've discussed, my whole kind of theory or ethos on cameras is you have one camera for each lens. So this is the Zorky 4K camera that goes with the Snapshot Skopar. So that's the new combo in my stable, and I'm really looking forward to getting out and shooting that combo because it's a lens that I really, really enjoy. I have that lens, the 25 millimeter Voigtlander, but I have it for in Nikon S mount, which I use on my my Kiev, but I just don't always want to shoot that camera because I find that mount to be fundamentally annoying for street photography. So I finally gotten an LTM version of that lens, and I finally have the right camera to put it on. So I'm really excited to get started with that. And thank you very much, Eric, for sending the camera on a whim. It kind of came up in a conversation. He's like, "Oh, I'll send you one. I've got one." and I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay, whatever." And he actually did send it. So it arrived this week after a very short travel between Mons, Belgium and Chicago. So that's pretty cool.
So that 25 millimeter, the LTM version's also not rangefinder coupled, right?
Yes, although I might have to look this up. I believe there is a 25 millimeter version of it that is rangefinder coupled, and maybe it's the M mount version versus the LTM version.
That version is not coupled? I know that for sure.
Oh, okay, it's not. All right, because the version that I have, the SC Skopar for Nikon S, is rangefinder coupled.
Right, but that's a function of it being on the mount.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious. So then you're going to be shooting it as a scale focus lens,
right?
On a camera with a beautiful 1:1 50 millimeter finder.
That is correct, sir. So the thing that I love the most about the Zorky 4K, one of the things, is the beautiful 1:1 viewfinder, which I will not be using.
Yeah,
I will in fact be ignoring the viewfinder and using the external viewfinder on the camera up on the top.
Because that's okay. Because I used to have a Mir 3, which I think is the same as the Zorky, except without the self timer. And my favorite thing about that camera by far was that viewfinder.
It's a great viewfinder. It's a better viewfinder than any viewfinder on any Leica screw mount camera ever made. It really is.
Oh yeah.
The screw mount.
I mean, it's big, it's bright, it's contrasty.
Yeah.
It has that built-in tint, which all of them need, instead of forcing you to buy a $2,200 orange filter thing.
Right. Exactly. It's got all that going for it, which is a great thing, especially when you don't need it. And it seems like it's functioning great. I think, Eric, if you're still smoking as much as you have been, you need to cut that out, because this camera smells like a cigar factory. So I'm going to have it degassing out the cigarette smell in a little Tupperware container full of baking soda for a few days. But other than that, and that's not a complaint, I'm just pulling your leg, Eric. So no, it's really nice. And it's nicer than the one that I currently have, because it, the shutters are actually light tight, which is a big plus. But I really like this camera. I mean, to me, if you look at it, what it is on the surface, it's essentially just a Barnack Leica at its guts, right? It's not that much different, but I feel like the way it feels in the hand and the way it handles and just the design aesthetic of it, to me, it is one of the most quintessentially Soviet of all Soviet cameras. I mean, it has a particular look and feel to it that is truly unique to this camera. There is nothing else that looks quite like a Zorky 4K, or that whole line of Zorkies after like the fours. They all have that particular sort of top angles and lines on the top of the camera that's peculiar to the Zorky 4, which I'm a very big fan of that design aesthetic with this camera.
And Johnny, you can clear something up for me now, because when you're talking about it being, and Perry, about it being a 1:1 and effectively a 50mm viewfinder, I've got it in my head that there's like a dial on the side of the viewfinder that you can turn, and that changes the angle of view.
Yes.
Am I losing it, or does it?
Well, it's basically it's more like a diopter.
Yeah.
Where it's just a focusing. It's a really big switch.
Yeah.
For focusing the diopter. So when you get it, when you get it perfectly in focus, it's 1:1.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That explains it. Because I mean, I did play with that, and I just couldn't remember because I knew it was doing something.
Yeah,
and it's coming back to me now, because I had to move it so I could actually see what I was doing with it.
Yeah, so it's a very both eyes open, great both eyes open viewfinder.
And it's a very, very wide range diopter.
Yes.
Because I wear glasses, and it's the only camera I've had where I can just adjust that diopter without adding anything to it, and I can see perfectly with my glasses off through it.
Wow, really?
Yeah. The range is wild. Like it's way wilder, way bigger than any digital camera's diopter.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my addition this week. So the lens. So I had bought the lens and was talking about buying the lens, and the lens had not even arrived yet. And Eric went and sent me the camera. So the lens and the camera arrived pretty much at the same time. So yeah, I have it's a new combo kit in my arsenal. So what I've realized now that this this camera has arrived, I'm also, my other photographic news is that I've been in the process of reorganizing my office, which has become a bit of a disaster because it has a year's worth of things that I've just pulled off the shelf to play with and then left out. Which is pretty much how I roll. So I have stuff everywhere and I desperately need to reorganize. And while I'm at this process of reorganizing, now that I have this camera, I can no longer fight the reality that I have far too many cameras that I'm not using. And those cameras, almost every single one is an SLR. So I have a big problem right now of having too many SLRs, having more cameras than I need. Most of them are SLRs, and I really need to send them off on their way to a new home. So that's going to be my next project, which is finally coming to terms with which cameras I really need to let go of. And quite a few are gonna get let go of.
Oh, that takes discipline.
It's got to happen, Perry. I got to do it. I have too many other things I want to shoot, and I'm just not going to shoot all these things. It's just not going to happen. So I just got to make it happen. So, yeah.
You got to be like KARL.
Got to be like KARL. Exactly. KARL was so good at this, and I also just can't afford to be, just buying things when I want them, and this will really help me to be really good about being revenue neutral, essentially, on cameras. When I want to get something, I'll have money there because I've done this. I had enough money to get this lens without just buying it out of pocket. So it'll be a really good way for me to be able to get some things that I want to have. Without spending money out of pocket. I can sell other things to get them. So I'm kind of excited about this new concept of selling things, selling cameras.
Hey, can I bring it back really quickly to something you mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
When you were talking about the panoramic 21 millimeter on the Bessa.
Yeah.
And how that seems like the perfect focal length. So I agree. I think 20 to 24 millimeters is the perfect focal length for panorama. And I have a theory as to why. And I think it's because what you're effectively getting is the ultra wide field of view on the horizontal, right?
Yeah.
But then your vertical field of view is pretty much double. So when you're using a 21 millimeter, you're pretty much getting a 42 or 43 millimeter on the vertical, which is a very normal angle of view. That's my theory.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I agree. I think you're 100% right. I think you're right on the money. Is that it's with the panoramic, the whole point is the balance between the horizontal and the vertical field of view, right? And it doesn't work with all lenses. Yeah. There are some that to me just don't feel right. I hate to say it, but so Hamish was kind enough to send me this. What is this? Hold on a second. The Panomicron,
yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Which I'm also kind of using in the background, but I feel like the one missing thing, and it's a pretty serious miss with this camera, is the 50 millimeter lens.
What lens is on it?
It has a 50 millimeter f2.8 lens from, I want to say it's converted from some sort of Bronica something or another. And I gotta say, I think that focal length is a big miss with this camera. Because if this camera had a wider lens on it, I think I would be probably saying I'm going to sell all these old things I don't have and get a Panomicron. Now that may still happen. Maybe the person who makes it can make it with a lens that's a better fit for the panoramic angle of view, which to me would be like, a equivalent of like a 28 or a 21 or a 24. But I feel like the 50 millimeter lens is not. It's like too magnified. Now, maybe for people who shoot other subject matter, but I really like to shoot like with my panoramics. I really like to shoot like basically urban landscape, street scene kind of stuff. And for other types of photography, this might be a perfect combo. But for me, it's like there's just a mismatch between the horizontal panoramic and the vertical, field of view with that focal length lens on this camera.
Doesn't the Panomicron shoot an X-pan sized negative?
It does, yes.
So if the lens is 50 millimeters, wouldn't you get something similar to about 24 or 25 millimeters on the horizontal, and then 50 on the vertical, so that it's not that much tighter than a 21 cropped in half?
Well, maybe, but to me, the horizontal and the vertical they don't feel balanced.
To be fair, the difference between 25 millimeters and 21 is quite substantial.
Yeah,
like a 20% difference.
Yeah, but I would have to do the to look it up, but it doesn't even feel that wide to me. And maybe part of it's the viewfinder. I mean, I don't know how accurate the viewfinder is, but it feels quite a bit different in terms of the compositionally the crop that I'm seeing, at least in the viewfinder.
I've got something to add to this, and there's a few things. The first one is Hamish also generously lent his Minolta X-Pan thing, P's or whatever it's called, and when I first looked through it, I had this big wide grin on my face because it says 24 millimeter view, but that's cropped with a decent size viewfinder instead of one of these tiny little viewfinders that you would get in a camera that can be cropped, usually a compact camera of some description. And I thought, this is wonderful. I can't wait to get out there and use it. Prior to that, I'd been using a Fuji DL Super Mini, also known as a Tiara, and that's a 28 millimeter lens with the mask that you can put in there, and it's got one of these small viewfinders, and I quite like the look that was given me, and which is fair enough. And then the next thing that come along was the Horizon, and which just completely blew my mind, as we've talked about that at length. And the other week I went out with the Horizon and I took the Minolta with me, and the Minolta became boring to me because it was almost like a telephoto view compared to what I was getting used to with using the Horizon. Mm-hmm. So these, I guess, really what I'm saying is your perspectives on what's a right focal length can absolutely change depending upon the equipment that you use and what you get used to.
I'm trying not to say perspective has nothing to do with focal length.
No, we're not going there. But you get, when you look through the viewfinder of the Horizon, you get you got a full sized viewfinder, And it's really wide, and you get that as soon as you look at it. And I've said before, the actual photographs that you get and compared to what you see in the viewfinder can be quite radically different. But when you go from the horizon and then put that little Minolta to your eye, you're there thinking, well, this is it just feels like a telephoto compared. And it's just gone from being fantastic to thinking, well, actually, I think I actually might even prefer my 28mm cropped, because then I'm getting more of what feels more like a cinematic point of view, whereas the horizon is giving me true panorama.
Well, I think there's something to that, because the horizon it's a wider panorama, quite a bit wider than the Fuji, which really is a cinematic ratio. I mean, the Fuji is almost exactly a Panavision ratio, which is the word cinematic is very apt here because it is truly like a cinema format. Yeah. Whereas the horizon is truly like, I would say, a panoramic camera, but panorama meaning greater than that angle of view that would be like cinematic panorama. Yes. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think you're onto something there, Simon.
Yeah. Even if it's the same field of view on a different camera, I think I totally get what you mean too, because I tried the 90mm lens at a shop on my X-Pan the other day, and I put it on and just felt this is no good. I don't like it. It doesn't feel the same, even though the aspect ratio is the same.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's end this conversation on that note, or else we're going to be here all day again, aren't we? So, have we got?
Do you think Hamish survived this program?
Oh dear, we have to give him forewarning, aren't we? Yeah.
We need to put a parental warning on this thing, but for Hamish.
Yeah.
It's PGHG. This program is PGHG.
That's just given me an idea for one of the pictures that we're going to put into our artwork.
We're thinking on the same lines, Simon.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Johnny, have you got any shout outs this week?
Oh, sort of. I have one, and it's in the pocket of one of my work shirts, so I'll do it next week. But I do have not exactly a shout out, but a reminder shout out. And I'm just going to scroll up and find this because Bob Matter sent me a little reminder for something to mention on the podcast this week. And apropos of our conversation of real life meetings coming out of virtual connections, right? There is coming up on Saturday, September 28th, which is this coming Saturday. There is a photo walk at 3 p.m. It is the Pilsen Photo Walk. And what they're going to do is they're going to walk around the neighborhood of Pilsen in Chicago, which is a great neighborhood. I used to live there. Very colorful, amazing neighborhood. And they're going to be meeting at 3 p.m. at the National Museum of Mexican Art, which is at 1852 West 19th Street in Chicago. And they're going to do a Pilsen Photo Walk. And if I was not working on Saturday at Central Camera, that is definitely where I would want to be. That's going to be an awesome time. So you can find out more about that at ChicagoAnalogLeague.com. So Chicago, ANALOG League.com. So check that out. That is the Pilsen Photo Walk coming up this Saturday, the 28th.
Cool. And how about you, Perry?
Quick shout out to Jean-Marc Duong, who I mentioned earlier in the show, for going shooting with me and also letting me try that sweet Simlar lens.
Excellent. I don't have any shout outs. I think I said a few during the show. So Perry, outside of this podcast, how can people keep up with the things that you do?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram and Flickr at PerryG, or my website, perryg.com.
Okay, and Johnny?
You can find me at Sisson Photography on Instagram, and you can also catch up with me at Central Camera Company in Chicago most days of the week.
And if anybody wants to make some form of communication with the show,
they should communicate with us via email, ideally, and send us an email at classiclensespodcast@gmail.com. And of course, you can follow along the podcast directly at classiclensespodcast.com. And of course, you can follow along with on Instagram. You can follow along with Best Vintage Lens on Instagram, and you definitely want to make sure you read the official Best Vintage Lens program summary, better than the podcast itself, coming to you on a almost weekly basis, sometimes every other week, but more or less regular basis. So you'll want to check that out for sure as well.
And if somebody wants to listen to the show but watch subtitles, is there a way they can do that?
There is. Yeah, they can do that on YouTube. I guess is it Classic Lenses Podcast on YouTube?
That's
okay.
it.
So Classic Lenses, look us up, Classic Lenses Podcast on the YouTubes.
Yeah, and if you listen to if a few people listen to our show, we'll actually get some of those. I mean, we call them videos, but they're not. But we'll get those recordings into double figures. So, because that's why we're doing YouTube, because you get out to a far wider audience.
That's right.
Okay. I think we should do a special shout out for Graham. Graham for sure. Jargo, should we say, or should we say Jago? Or Jago?
Jago.
Yeah, Jago, definitely. So Graham Jago, thanks for being on the show earlier, for being a great sport. You can listen to Graham twice a week, or usually twice a week, because he's on the Sunny 16 podcast, which usually comes out on a Thursday, sometimes out on a Friday, and they're so popular. They have 2 shows a week, because they also do like a letters and correspondence show called Back in Paper, and that usually goes out on a Monday night. So if you've not listened to them, do give them a listen. It's a damn good photography podcast. And actually, he's also on Instagram as Myopic Me. When else is Graham? I think he's on Twitter as well, actually. When you see Sunny 16 on Twitter, that's usually Graham as well. He's also on there as Banjaxed Monkey, but I haven't seen him on using that one for a while. But he's usually behind the acerbic comments on the Twitter account, and it's also actually good to hear Jeremy North's comments about the show on Twitter. That could be a good laugh. So thank you there again, Jeremy, as well. Both Jeremys, I just realised this is a bit of an in-joke that Jeremy and Graham are the same person, but not Jeremy North. But anyway, so that clears that one up. So you can find me on Twitter as Simon4, as Instagram as Simon Forster Photographic. We hang out in our dedicated Facebook group, which is the Classic Lenses Podcast Facebook group, but we're also strongly affiliated with Photography with Classic Lenses. So the difference being is, if it's something specific to the podcast, drop it into that group. If it's all about classic lenses, it can go in either. So that's almost it. You can also hear me once a fortnight on the Large Format Photography podcast, and I've alluded to the fact that we may actually talk a little bit more about perspective next week, or the week after, whenever it goes out. So we might even be able to put that one to bed, as Hamish will be very happy about if we can actually manage to do that. We get whatever the theory is into my thick skull. We'll get there. Last thing, thanks to Kevin McLeod of Incompetech.com for our music, which is Octo Blues. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this week's show, and if you can, be like KARL.
I've find mine. I've got mine, but I do have some thoughts on how to describe a haiku for people. Very helpful.
Okay, so you can do so if I ask you what is a haiku or something like that, because I can talk about, we've decided to do a haiku. So would it be good for me to then, once I've said that how we've come to do the haiku as a competition, do you want to explain what that is? Is that how we will do
I'll give it my best shot.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I've got something written
From my
down.
extensive research.
Yeah. If you go completely wrong, I've got 4 lines on it as well.
I doubt that's going to happen, Simon.
Yeah.
But how many syllables in each line, Simon?
7, 5, and 7.
What?
No,
No,
that's
five,
not
seven,
right.
five.
Yeah.
575. Wrong
man.
out the fucking.
Oh, I got that wrong last time. Yeah. Yeah. It is. I've actually. I've got it in front of me now. It is 575. Yeah.
You had one job.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. Oh, I didn't spell poem right earlier as well. There you go. What can you say? How'd you get a word like that?
I nearly just sprayed water all over the Simlar, dude.
So, what else are we going to talk about then? Because I thought that was the theme for this week.
Oh, just talking about new stuff, you know.
Yeah, I got like at least 2 things.
Okay. Well, there you go. You need to make this really count, Graham. We're counting on you for our entire show, it sounds like.
Okay, I am just when you say emails, I'm just going to go into this in full backing paper mode. You realise that?
Yeah.
That's good.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Because we'll just work it however it works. Okay, right then. So let's bring this up. That's working. I've got 19 minutes of blackmail already recorded.
Oh, this is great. All right. I just remembered something that I was asked to read out on the podcast as an announcement, which is I can't believe I remembered to do this. So I'm going to drop it in our chat just so I won't forget.
Right, but that's not for Graham to read out then.
No, this is just for me to mention.
Yeah.
Oh, I love how the preview comes up as Chicago anal.
From
From Bob
YouTube
Banner.
channel, isn't it, Johnny?
Yeah, that sounds pretty much like my normal week, Chicago anal. All right, and I gotta just do my HG13. So I'm just gonna pull the PG13, make it HG, and drop it over a picture of Hamish.
I've just sent him a message and he's just come back. Really? God, I dread to think that you've talked about what you've talked about. Don't worry, we only did perspective.
That's the way it is, this picture, but that's outstanding.